Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Let me ask Dr. Shah. There's an ongoing debate over the use of cash-based food assistance, whether it's cash or food vouchers. I obviously, and you as well, know the benefits, timeliness of food getting to desperate people, and it's less costly to implement. But opponents argue that this is susceptible to fraud. Let me ask you, with the retina and other biometric scans and mobile tracking data and other technologies, how secure is a cash-based system? We hear of success stories like the one in Zatri refugee camps in Jordan. There's a market where people can buy and select their food, giving them some semblance of dignity. Aren't we one of the few remaining major donor countries to hold on to an in-kind food donation system?
Well, thank you. And yes, we are the only major donor that continues to send our food as opposed to our resources, and that impinges the capacity to be successful for all of the implementing partners. I'd note on security of electronic vouchers and paper vouchers, at this point, we now have 8 years of history doing this. So before, it was debatable to say, oh, is this going to be less secure or less effective? What we now know is that this is probably more secure because you can target the household. You don't get convoys being attacked because you're not sending convoys of cash. You're sending an electronic payment through a secure system to a vulnerable household. And by the way, the alternative are the food shipments are often attacked. And that speaks to the security risks of doing this work in increasingly challenging, conflict-affected environments. So there really is no debate anymore about is this more secure or less secure. It is clearly as or more secure. There's also no debate about is it effective or less effective. It is far more effective. It's certainly more efficient, but it also allows us to do a better job of targeting the most vulnerable families and children within a community. And that was basically the example of Somalia. It's like once you had that targeting done well, you could make a huge, huge difference in child death through a famine very, very, very quickly. And you would never be able to do that if you had the physical responsibility of providing people with actual food that came from the United States.
Thank you. Let me ask Secretary Glickman, when the Food for Peace program was initiated back in the 1950s, obviously the landscape for American food aid was much different than it is today. There were high agricultural surpluses, low prices. They were threatened. That was threatening the security of U.S. farmers. The U.S. shipping industry was in decline, and food needs around the world were ever increasing. What is different now, and in your opinion, why would reform be a big plus for American agriculture?
Surpluses of the major commodity crops are no longer nearly as great. There are still some crops with surpluses episodically, periodically, but overall we are dealing with supply and demand in the world, as Dr. Barrett talked about, a global world which is much more in sync and in equilibrium. So therefore the need to use surpluses to, let's say, bring down supplies to get price up is no longer anywhere near what it was before, and it probably has no impact on the price, as Dr. Barrett says. These are global markets, and the amount of food aid and the total amount of exports of corn and wheat and sorghum particularly is extraordinarily small.
Thank you. Let me get back to Dr. Shah. Dr. Shah, you and I, during the Haiti crisis, talked a great deal about what we should do in Haiti, and I visited there a number of times, and we talked about this. So the earthquake there really impacted us all. The people of the region obviously are still suffering the destruction today. I've seen firsthand how the sale of American rice under the Food for Peace program there drove local rice farmers out of business, making it harder for the Haitians to feed themselves. So if we had enacted the reforms to food aid before the earthquake hit Haiti 5 years ago, how would our response to this tragedy have been better, and how would it have been different in other disaster situations?
Well, we have a very specific answer to that question because as a result of using non-Food for Peace assistance tools and shutting down Food for Peace American food handouts, and monetization in particular, we were able to basically test and answer exactly what would happen. And we saw what would happen. We've seen a more than doubling of farm production in Haiti, as a result of taking away the dumping of American food and enabling and supporting those farmers to have access to better science and technology through Feed the Future. We've seen voucher programs like the one implemented by CARE International that target the most vulnerable households and children, give them a biometrically secure card, as you point out, and then allow their children to get access to the kinds of foods people need when they're malnourished, not just bags of rice, which, as we know, has very limited total nutritional value for a starving child. And the result has been proven in the Demographic and Health Survey, which is by far, it's frankly the only, it's also the best actual survey out there to tell you what's happening. And acute malnutrition in Haiti is 50% lower today amongst children than it was the day before the earthquake. This could happen everywhere we do the work if we had food aid reform. Because we know we have the science, we have the technology, we have the know-how, and frankly, we have the capacity to study the impacts, and we know how to do this. It's just the program is designed 60 years ago, and we keep doing the same things we did 60 years ago.
Let me just, with the Chairman's indulgence, pivot back to Secretary Glickman about this. Critics argue that buying food in country instead of delivering U.S. commodities actually undermines the message of U.S. generosity and goodwill to those in need. So I don't believe that, but I want to hear what you believe. Do you believe that USAID can still send the message that the U.S. is a partner for development and here to help those in need around the world while being more flexible in how it spends U.S. food assistance dollars?
I do. Saying that, I think that I'm not one that would eliminate in-kind assistance totally, because I think there is a role for U.S. commodities when it can't be purchased locally, or when the voucher program doesn't work, or you have these imminent emergencies like we had in Haiti or other places. However, American generosity is real. Just one example on this conference we went in Tanzania that Congresswoman Bass went with me on. What struck me about this was the positive feelings about the United States of America. There's Chinese investment all over Tanzania, mostly in infrastructure, but some in agriculture and some in sanitation and water, but mostly in infrastructure. And yet the clear acknowledgement from people we went to was American generosity writ large is profoundly agreed to, well respected, and it's one of the few places in the world I've been to where I honestly believe we are very popular in terms of what we do. And I think in large part that's due to the totality of American assistance in health, which is a big thing, started with President Bush and Bill Gates and others, in agriculture, in education and infrastructure. There's still a whole litany of problems to be solved there, but I don't view this issue as hurting our ability to be a positive influence.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.